I've started to recommend to people to completely remove test code coverage from their build output, or at the very least, stop looking at it. That seems like a very strange thing to recommend, right? What's wrong with test code coverage? It helps us write better and more tests, right? Well, no. Let me explain why it doesn't actually work that way. Part 1. What numbers do to us. I've got 2 stories, and the first one is about a step counter. A while back, I got myself a smartwatch, and it had a step counter on it. I started setting a goal for myself. I heard and read that reaching 10,000 steps per day is a good idea for your health. It should improve it. So I set myself this goal: reach 10,000 steps every day. And on most days I did. I walked, I got my 10,000 steps in, and I felt good about myself. And on some days when I didn't reach it, I felt a bit bad about myself. So where does this number 10,000 comes from? It turns out there's no scientific basis for this number at all. It turns out the reason we have this number 10,000 is because in the 1964 Tokyo Olympics, there was an increased focus on fitness in Japan, and they invented the pedometer, the step counter. And the first product name was the Japanese translation of the 10,000 step meter. A marketing department invented that number because it's an easy number to remember. That product name started to be translated, and that number is everywhere in the world now as a best practice. But it isn't the best practice. The number, there is no magic number. 8,000 steps will also do fine, or 15,000. There's no research to back up that number at all. My second example is about errors in production. Imagine you're in a Scrum team. You run 2-week sprints, and you've decided as a team to every sprint from now on in the demo, you also report the number of errors that users have seen in production. From now on, you can start collecting this historical data, so you can start plotting it in a chart if you want to. What happens to the team psychologically? They start to feel good about themselves if the number goes down. Less errors is better. And they start feeling bad about themselves if the number goes up. They start optimizing for this number. So when we're looking at a number, it's in our nature to try and get that number higher or lower if that's better. Human psychology makes us want to optimize and improve that number. This fact is heavily used in gamification. You get a tiny dopamine shot. Every time you increase this number, you're rewarded for that. That is what numbers do to us. We can use this fact for good and bad. Lowering the number of errors in productions that users see, that seems like a good thing. But getting 10,000 steps per day will not make you more healthy. Regular exercise in the right heart zones will. That is the solution if you want to become more healthy. Now let's look at what numbers do in the context of code coverage. Part 2. High test coverage is a lie. The painful truth is, it's very easy to get high test coverage with very low quality tests. It's even worse. You can get 100% test coverage without a single assert. So that's 100% test coverage with 100% worthless tests. And you might be thinking, but writing tests without asserts, that's malice. Nobody would actually consciously do that, right? You would be surprised what people do under pressure. But for this video, let's assume nobody has any evil intent. Coverage still incentivizes the wrong kind of thinking. Humans are hardwired to follow the path of least resistance. We will optimize the number. There's loads of scientific evidence to back this. When we're in a situation where we're writing the tests for a module with multiple functions, we're more likely to pick the function that's the easiest to test, because that requires us to write less code or not solve a difficult problem. This leads to badly tested code, unintentionally. We're avoiding important work. So if code coverage doesn't actually tell us this code is of high quality or these tests are of high quality, what does it actually tell us? It only tells us when you run this code in the happy path, it doesn't throw an error. That's pretty useless, because that's the least interesting thing to test. And you still don't know anything about the assertions. That's the kind of information that your editor usually already gives you, especially if you're using a strong type language. So there's no value in having this number. Then how do you get high quality tests? By using test-driven development. Because TDD forces you to write the test case first, you have to think about the assertion first. And the assertion is what makes a good test a good test. TDD forces you to make good assertions. If you want to learn more about this, check out my video on why TDD. Test-driven development will also increase the code coverage, but you don't want to be paying attention to the code coverage number. chasing that number will not get you high quality tests. Writing better assertions will get you high quality tests. Part 3. Turning it off. Now that we know this, the conclusion is to turn off code coverage. Make sure you can't look at the number anymore. The number itself is meaningless, so get rid of the number. I recommend to remove code coverage reporting from both your terminal output and your build server output. It's giving you a false sense of security. Build servers even make it green if it goes up and red if it goes down. It is lying to you. That number is manipulating you. There's 2 exceptions I can think of where you can use coverage in a limited form. For example, when you're adding tests to a previously untested codebase, having access to a list of files that have less than, say, 50% code coverage, that list could act as a to-do list. Like, these are the files that are still untested. Everything that is more than 50% is supposedly then tested and is not useful looking at anymore. The other exception is getting a warning when you're lowering code coverage significantly, for example 50%, in a single commit. That's often an accident. You may have accidentally deleted a whole swaths of files or something like that. You probably want to be notified of that. It can prevent you from making a mistake. But remember that these 2 exceptions are not about looking at a total percentage number, because that would make you fall into the trap again. That would make you want to optimize for that again, subconsciously. That's not the way code coverage should work. So remember that when you are activating it, you're not looking at the number. To summarize, human psychology makes us want to optimize for numbers. This is gamification. The code coverage number is not worth optimizing. The number is not representative of test quality or code quality. It actually tells us almost nothing. Certainly nothing which pair programming or a code review won't catch. So let's turn off code coverage. And that's it. I hope this was helpful. I hope you liked it. If you have any thoughts, or if you completely disagree, or if you have a request for a future video, please leave a comment and subscribe. Thank you very much for watching.